Recently, I've been giving saving throws quite a bit of thought. By doing these multi-class breakdowns, what I realized is that a lot of classes don't have the saves that are optimal. Well, let's take a look at Rogue. Rogues have dexterity saves as their big save. If you don't know, there are 3 big saves, 3 small saves. Dexterity, Wisdom, and Constitution are the big saves. Intelligence, Charisma, and Strength are the smaller saves. Every class gets 1 strong save and 1 weak save. The reason one is strong and one is weak is that most enemies you face are going to do strong saving throws, with very niche ones doing these weak saving throws. But going back to the Rogue, we have these dexterity saves, that's our strong save. But you also have evasion, and evasion makes your dex saves fantastic in and of itself, because it takes it from either half damage to full damage to either half damage or no damage. Without having proficiency in dex saves, we're already fantastic at taking care of dex saves. So the point I'm making here is that a rogue would actually appreciate having proficiency in wisdom saves more than they would dexterity saves. And the reason I bring that up is because it's something to consider when you're multi-classing. One of the biggest parts of which level you take first is how you're going to line up your saves for your build. Another example of this is that there's a lot of marshals who get constitution saves. What they're going to use their constitution saves for is basically resistance against poison. That's the primary thing. Now, poison does suck on a marshal. However, the biggest thing you go into constitution for is actually your constitution saves for spells. So marshals don't get the most out of constitution, and spellcasters who really want it often don't have it. So there's a lot of interesting nuance with these saves, and you really can't get around it unless you're multi-classing. So if you're multi-classing, that's just a big consideration for you to just keep in mind. Now, talking about these big 3, dexterity, wisdom, and constitution, I think that dexterity has the most options for us to take care of outside of having proficiency in that save. Well, evasion was an example that you can basically have a more powerful proficiency in a feature. So you have monks and rogues who really don't need those dex saves. But there's also absorb elements. Now, absorb elements isn't going to handle every dex save, but it does handle a large amount of dex saves. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you are bad at dex saves, you might be able to fix that problem without having to find proficiency in it. And then that can leave you open to get one of the more important proficiencies. Constitution is probably the most important one if you're going to be a concentration caster, because it's going to be coming up all the time. But overall, I'd say the number 1 save that you really need to have really good are your wisdom saves. Take it from somebody who's played a lot of marshals, there is nothing worse than having a low wisdom save, because a lot of the enemies, they can cast a single spell, and not only are you useless for several turns until you save, you're going to be mind controlled for a long time. And not only is that going to be not fun because you're not even getting to play, you're also going to be attacking teammates. So wisdom saves are always one that I'm looking at to make sure I can get it as high as possible no matter what the build is. I'm going to fulfill whatever the build is trying to do, and then with whatever remaining points I have, I'm going to try and fortify our wisdom saves. Now, unlike dexterity save, wisdom saves do not have an easy option to pad them. There's some easy options for constitution. You have feats. You have invocations that are going to give you advantage on your concentration checks. But wisdom does have things like this, but they're pretty few and far between and usually expensive. Some that come to mind are Oath of the Watchers, Channel Divinity, Hero's Feast is another one. So you do have options, but they're not going to come up all the time. So how I would rate it is wisdom is probably the most important, constitution second, dexterity third. Now, with me saying dex saves are the worst, that doesn't mean underestimate them. If you have low HP and you don't have good dexterity saves, you can get absolutely decimated, because that's what dexterity saves are all about, avoiding damage. Wisdom saves are mostly about brain control or the way your character acts. Constitution saves, concentration, and poison. That's kind of how you can broadly categorize them. But when it comes to dexterity, if we pay 0 attention to it, we can get absolutely owned. It can be a major weakness. So trying to pad that is a good idea. Now, on the other side, are weak saves. These are the ones that we usually can dump and be pretty much okay through the majority of campaigns. So when it comes to intelligence saves, mind flayers, if mind flayers are playing a big role in your campaign, that's probably when you're going to want to actually pay attention to intelligence saves. Otherwise, you can basically ignore them. Charisma saves are probably the ones we want to defend the most when it comes to our bad defenses. And that's because charisma saves usually just take you away from this plane of existence. They usually teleport you to another plane, which can be bad to devastating. On the strength side of things, that's probably going to come up the most often out of the weak ones, but it usually has to do with getting knocked prone or getting grappled. Things along those lines can be bad, probably the second one we want to set up. So if I were to categorize them, I'd say strength probably takes top, not because it's the most devastating, but because it's probably going to come up more often than charisma. If charisma came up as often, it would be more devastating, so charisma's second, with intelligence being last of the list. But anyways, these are just thoughts I've been having about saves as I've been doing my builds, but I would love to hear your thoughts about saving throws. Is there anything I missed or some really good information that I would benefit from knowing? Let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, I just hope you have yourselves a lovely day, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.